Welcome to the DWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the DWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 96 of the DWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, we are going to have a mini series of reflections on what it takes to become a DWI master. Over the last 6 episodes, we've talked with 3 DWI masters on episodes 90 and 91. We talked to James Davis on 92 and 93. We talked to Al Messer, and on 94, 95, we talked to Marcus Hill, some of the most amazing legal minds in North Carolina when it comes to DWI practice and representation. And so we have a couple of more masters planned in our DWI Masters Series. But before we get too far into that, I want to take a minute to reflect, actually more than a minute, a little bit of time, honestly, a good substantial amount of time to reflect on some of the lessons that we should draw out of these amazing legal minds, as well as some of the other great guests that we've had on the podcast. So we're going to take a couple of episodes to reflect on what character traits are required in order to become a DWI master. What should you be focusing on if you are intent on being one of the best DWI trial lawyers in North Carolina or in your particular state or jurisdiction? How can you make that goal a reality? And so we're going to, I think, start in the order that these things are going to occur today by talking about the importance of education. Being an amazing DWI lawyer is going to begin and end in some ways with having your brain wrapped around the legal issues that are connected to DWI cases. Being a student of DWI law all your life, being a student of DWI law. All 3 of the DWI masters that we've talked to over the last few podcasts, and then many other guests on the podcast, have talked about how important it has been for them to constantly remain up to date on DWI issues, constantly be researching, constantly be learning, constantly be studying, constantly be teaching DWI and DWI issues, DWI representation, figuring out how they can improve their knowledge of this area of law. Albert Einstein said that, quote, "Wisdom is not a product of schooling, but of the lifelong attempt to acquire it," end quote. This idea of being a lifelong learner is so important a skill set to bring to the equation when you are trying to become the best in your area. I think there's some studies out there or different thinkers that have kind of put this idea out there of, in order to become a master of something, you have to spend 10,000 hours doing it, right? 10,000 hours practicing that particular area, but focusing in on that particular skill set, 10,000 hours of time. And that is, something that really kind of is this idea that the more time that you spend studying something, the more time you spend engaged in something, the higher return on investment that you're going to have, and the more you're going to have an understanding of that particular skill, that particular practice area, that particular job. And it's no different when it comes to DWI. We come out of law school, taking the bar, as general practitioners, the best general practitioners probably in the state, because we have just taken a exam that tests us on every single walk of life, every single thing that could come under the law. And unfortunately, maybe one thing that law school does in terms of focusing in on all these various types of legal study and legal emphasis, and that the bar does in terms of emphasizing all these various areas of legal study and emphasis, is that it really causes us, I think, to focus heavily on this breadth of knowledge being what is so important in terms of practicing law. It's still almost like a re-emphasizing of the importance of a general practitioner. And I don't think that you can have necessarily specialty exams for each practice area coming out of law school. That wouldn't really make the most sense. But we have to rid ourselves of this idea that we should be general practitioners, that we should be able to have an understanding of everything under the law. It's not possible. There is too much out there information wise to be a master of that many specialties. It's too much. We got to focus in on something. And if you want to be the master in your area, in your state of DWI practice, or one of the masters, you need to make learning DWI important in your practice, in your life, part of your firm atmosphere, depending on the size of your office. It's important to emphasize that. Now, the good news on this front is you have never, ever in the history of lawyering in North Carolina had a better opportunity to learn DWI than now. There has never been more educational materials out there for you to soak in as an attorney than exist out there now. We have gone through a whole laundry list of incredible resources available to North Carolina DWI practitioners back on episode 53. So if you want to get a good sense of where some of these resources are located, both ones that cost money and free resources, then go take a listen to episode 53. But you'd really have to try in order to not have the opportunity to grow your knowledge of DWI. There are so many places, CLEs, that are available to attorneys that focus in on very specialized information about DWI issues, cases related to DWI, statutes related to DWI, the constitutional law as it relates to driving while impaired charges. There is almost no end to the amount of continuing legal education that exists out there. I would imagine that if you had come out and started practicing 25 years ago, that if you wanted to go to an all-day CLE on DWI, that would have been a very difficult thing to do. It would have been a very difficult thing to have a day where you focused on DWI all day in terms of a continuing legal education class. Now, you could go to probably 3 or 4 of those within the state of North Carolina a year. You could go to them in other places, other local areas, very close, Georgia, South Carolina, where they talk about kind of multi-state issues on these things, or more broad issues about field sobriety tests. You can take courses through the National College of DUI Defense online, North Carolina Advocates for Justice. They're doing when this podcast airs, you still have a day and a half to sign up for the North Carolina Advocates for Justice CLE on mastering expert witnesses in DWI cases. that's happening this Friday. So there's just an endless amount of, and if you're getting this after that, you can probably go online and listen to that same NCAJ CLE for the next 15 years. So there's no reason to miss that CLE. Even if you're hearing this Saturday or later, you're going to be able to have an opportunity to access that. And that's what I'm talking about. There is just an endless amount of resources, past CLEs that you can go listen to, current ones that you can attend virtually or in person, that are all focused on your DWI practice. And that is a blessing that just has not existed until very recently and is continuing to get easier and easier to access with many of these CLEs offering virtual opportunities. There's no reason to miss out on these learning opportunities as easy as they are to access. In North Carolina, our bar requirements now are that you can basically attend most of your CLE courses virtually. Most of it can be done through a virtual format. In person is not emphasized in the way that it was in years past. And so, you don't have any good excuse for not going in and getting these learning opportunities set up. It's so easy. Nelson Mandela once said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. That is so true. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. It's the most powerful weapon which you can use to fight for your client in the courtroom. It's the most powerful weapon for which you can prepare your client for the consequences that they are facing. It's the most powerful weapon that you have to defend your client's rights, your education, being able to guide the potential client during the consult in terms of what their future actions need to look like to guarantee that they can do everything possible to get the best possible outcome in the courtroom, is all going to be based on how much you have educated yourself ahead of that call coming in. You don't get there in one day. Rome wasn't built in a year. Neither is your understanding of the intricacies and nuances of DWI law. It is an extremely complex and complicated area of law, which is what makes it so much fun. And you're not going to learn all those intricacies and nuances in one day. So you got to love the process of learning. You are never, ever going to arrive at a place where you understand in and out every aspect of North Carolina DWI law. You're never going to have it all figured out. There's always going to be new cases coming out. Statutes are going to change. There's going to be variety in terms of the consequences that happen both within the courtroom and outside of court in terms of the person's license, job. There's always going to be new and different ways that you can expand your knowledge that will help you better serve your clients. So you've got to start loving the process of developing your understanding of DWI cases, statutes, issues. If you love the process, you will become a lifelong learner of DWI specific issues. And that's what's going to allow you to then become a master. Because the DWI masters are not the ones that have it all figured out. This is what I think we've learned from these last few weeks and these amazing interviews with some of the best DWI lawyers that practice within our state, is that they don't have it all figured out. They're constantly learning. They're constantly growing their understanding of DWI issues. That's what makes them masters. It's because they have such high level of knowledge of DWI issues from just constant and continuous and repeated study of these issues that come into play on a DWI case, but they're never satisfied. The process of learning is where they find their fulfillment. It's not in the achievement of understanding everything. It's in the process of getting better mentally, getting more mentally sharp on these issues. So again, there's all of these CLEs out there that exist. I mean, you could watch probably 100 hours of CLE on DWI issues specifically taught by North Carolina practitioners, some of these same people that have been on the podcast, through some of the CLE providers within our state, without breaking a sweat. And that doesn't get into the national organizations that exist and places from other states and the live CLEs that are currently coming up or on track to come up. There is just an amazing amount of information that is out there online. And yes, you have to pay for the CLEs, but again, the cost of that investment of improving your practice is minuscule to the long-term impact that's going to have as you are growing your own understanding, deepening your own understanding of these issues. Being a student of the law is so darn important. It's so important. Student mindset is one of the core values of our firm. Again, it's not expert mindset. It's student mindset that is the core value, because it's the process of learning that's important to us. It's being a student, not being a teacher, that is important to us. The best students are the best teachers ultimately, because it's those people that never want to stop learning, don't have it all figured out, haven't closed their mind off to what different ways they could explore this or that issue, or present this case to the judge, or just realize that there's constantly new developments in the law coming on the horizon. Got to have that student mindset. In addition to all these paid ways of developing your education when it comes to DWI, there's so many free ways. And again, we talked about some of these on episode 53, but there is no end to the amount of books out there that talk about DWI law. I mean, there are textbooks, multiple textbooks written as though you were going to take a class in law school on DWI law. Then there are state-specific manuals. There are guidebooks, sentencing books, all related to DWI, constitutional and criminal procedure issues that are specific to DWI that have been written about in long form in these publications. Tons of information out there, tons of manuals and textbooks and handbooks and guidebooks and practitioner books and forms and all kinds of information on that front. No excuse for not getting access to that. Podcasts. There's podcasts now. You're listening into one, but there's podcasts now that exist as to DWI specific lawyering. That's insanity, right? You tune in and sharpen your skill set. Again, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, this did not exist. And it's not because I'm bringing something new to the table. Podcasting is new. I mean, we have so many educational opportunities at our fingertips. We are so blessed in terms of being able to grow our minds and better represent our clients because of the free sharing of information that has just flowed out of all of these new technological advancements. We're so blessed on that front. Take advantage of those free opportunities. There are websites, tons of information. You know, there's an incredible amount of information. If you just went to 50 DWI lawyer websites in North Carolina, you would be able to consume enough information that you'd probably be reading articles, blogs, posts from those sites for months I mean, literally for months on DWI specific issues. There is an incredible outpouring of information from lawyers on this subject, and it's out there for the taking. It's out there for the consumption. You can separate yourself by being the person that actually says, you know what, I'm going to go consume that content, because there's not a ton of people doing it. Most people that listen to this podcast are going to say, you know what, this all sounds good. This sounds great. But then are they going to go sit down and write a schedule out as to how I'm going to go further my knowledge of DWI? How much time a week am I spending learning DWI issues and cases better? Carving that out, planning for it, scheduling it. If you're the one doing that, you are the one that is going to become a DWI master. There is no doubt about it. You will be the person that other attorneys look to for guidance in the courtroom. You'll be the person that is best equipped to handle a consultation when it comes in the phone. You'll be the person that is best equipped to stand in front of a judge or a jury and argue on behalf of your client, because you'll have put in the practice hours of training your mind and wrapping your mind around these complex issues. It takes time to think through this stuff. It really is a complex area of law. The amount of science and police training and understanding how an investigation is supposed to go, and roadside investigation and expert witnesses that come into play on a DWI case, all of these issues that stem out of that criminal procedure that comes into play. There are so many little nuanced issues that come out. And if you don't know about them, you cannot identify those to a client. You cannot attack those down the road in the courtroom, because you don't even know that that attack point exists. You will literally separate yourself if you spend that time understanding DWI law. Putting in those hours is going to be a massive competitive advantage, and is going to allow you to become a DWI master. Finally, final point on this front of education is that G.K. Chesterton once said, quote, "Education is simply the soul of a society as it passes from one generation to another," end quote. Education is simply the soul of a society as it passes from one generation to another. If you want to get educated on these issues, yes, go to the CLE, where some of these masters that we've talked to on the podcast and others across the state, others in our nation, are the best DWI minds across the country, across the state, are teaching and allowing you access to their years of experience. If you want to soak in the soul of the past generation educationally, the best way to do that is in the courtroom. If you want to be the best lawyer, one of the best lawyers in your county, in your jurisdiction, go watch the people that are doing it well, day in and day out, in the thick of it in district court. That's a education that is free and absolutely the best education that you could get access to. Figure out when cases are going to trial. Go in. If you don't have a heavy caseload, if you've got a time, and if you don't have the time, you better start carving it out. If you want to be the best lawyer in your area, figure out when the top DWI attorneys in your jurisdiction are going to have a case tried, and go watch them try that case. You will learn more in watching that case get tried than you'll learn in a CLE, then you'll learn in a book, then you'll learn from a podcast, then you'll learn from a blog that you read about. That is how you see the actual practice of law translate in the courtroom. When it comes to being a better trial lawyer, the best education you can get on that front is watching the best in their practice, watching the masters do it. Watch them get it done in the courtroom. That is an education that, again, is free, but is priceless. Priceless in terms of what you're going to get out of that experience. Go hit the courtroom. Go figure out when these trials are going to be set. Go watch superior court trials that are being done where the person is being represented by those top DWI lawyers in your area. That's how you see these issues get exposed in the courtroom, presented, how arguments are made to a judge, how arguments are made to a jury, how cross-examination works, what legal issues work in this particular county or that particular county in front of this particular judge or that particular judge. That's where you get that education. Don't miss out on that opportunity. So we're going to, again, continue over the next few weeks some of these reflections that we are pulling out of what we have been given in terms of this blessing of these great lawyers that have gone before us. So again, today, if you want to become a DWI master, it starts with education. It starts with enjoying the process. It starts with being a student of the law. Enjoy that process. Look forward to speaking with you next time. If you found the information in this podcast to be valuable, I simply ask that you pay it forward and share this podcast with another member of the legal community. Also, if you would leave us a rating or a review on whatever platform you are listening on, I would greatly appreciate it.